Broadcasting from the Chamber of Mazarbul off the 21st Hall in Moria, Middle-earth, this is the Secret Fire Podcast, sent to burn at the heart of the world, episode number 36. I'm Michael.
And I'm Micah.
On this episode, what became of Balin and his folk in Moria? What will become of the Company of the Ring here? We'll find out as we make our way to the Bridge of Khazad-dum, and we invite you to come along, join the fellowship, become a servant of the Secret Fire, right here on the GCT Network.
This is your Great Commission transmission.
Brendan is not here. Oh, Micah, it's been a few weeks again since we've broadcasted, and if folks have not joined or subscribed to our YouTube channel, or if you are not following us on Facebook at facebook.com/secretfirepodcast, you may not have seen the update video that I did a week ago or so, 2 weeks ago. We've had a lot going on here at the studio, and just at the end of last month, the end of June, Brendan and I did an episode of our other show, Finding Christ in Cinema. We talked about the movie The Justice League. That was on a Friday. Well, the very next morning, Brendan's father passed away. And so Brendan is mourning his dad and trying to get his bearings straight, being a young man and now the head of the family, basically in lieu of his father. And so he's not here with us this week. And then we were going to do a show with just Micah and I because that Sunday, the following Sunday, you flew out to California for 12 days.
Sure did.
How was that?
It was awesome.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that in the Party Tree segment. But one more thing that I want to talk about before we jump into it today is it's a very special day for our very... Can you hear him? Yeah. Sniffing on the microphone? Our dachshund, Pippin. He is our hobbit dog. Yesterday turned 1 year old. Hold him up to the camera, Micah, for those that are watching on Twitch or on YouTube. Pippin!
There he is.
Yes, our smooth 1 year old. And he really does have the spirit of Peregrine Took in him, I believe, don't you?
Yep. Very mischievous.
Yes. Yeah, hard to keep under control. He's inquisitive and just all around naughty. And so we wanted to celebrate him for the past, almost a year that we've had him. We got him when he was 6 weeks old, but we've been meaning to incorporate him a little bit more into the show here. He is the official mascot. Again, our hobbit dog, Pippin. Happy birthday, boy! Are you... Yeah, nose on the microphone.
Okay. That's all you get.
All right, let's go ahead and start with a song today to get us in the mood to go back into Moria. Here are the Brobdingnagian Bards off their album Memories of Middle-earth. This is the aptly titled song, Moria. once again the Brobdingnagian Bards from the album Memories of Middle-earth. That was Moria. You can find out more about them and buy all the music on their website at thebards.net. Here we are. Moria. Just off the 21st Hall, as a matter of fact. In the Chamber of Mazarbul.
Mazarbul is how I say it.
Okay, I like that even better than how I say it. The Chamber of Mazarbul was the old chamber of records of Khazad-dum, probably built during the earlier years of Khazad-dum. And then it was later used as a base by Balin when he began his ill-fated attempt at recolonization in the late Third Age, and we will find out more about that as we read today. Micah, let's go ahead and back up just a little bit, get a running start. So
All right.
I'm on page 318 of the Lord of the Rings one-volume edition. After they had breakfasted, Gandalf decided to go on again at once. "We are tired, but we shall rest better when we are outside," he said. "I think that none of us will wish to spend another night in Moria." "No, indeed," said Boromir. "Which way shall we take? Yonder eastward arch?" "Maybe," said Gandalf, "but I do not know yet exactly where we are. Unless I'm quite astray, I guess that we are above and to the north of the Great Gates, and it may not be easy to find the right road down to them. The Eastern Arch will probably prove to be the way that we must take, but before we make up our minds, we ought to look about us. Let us go towards that light in the north door. If we could find a window, it would help, but I fear that the light comes only down deep shafts." Following his lead, the company passed under the northern arch. They found themselves in a wide corridor. As they went along it, the glimmer grew stronger, and they saw that it came through a doorway on their right. It was high and flat-topped, and the stone door was still upon its hinges, standing half open. Beyond it was a large, square chamber. It was dimly lit, but to their eyes, after so long a time in the dark, it seemed dazzlingly bright, and they blinked as they entered. Their feet disturbed a deep dust upon the floor and stumbled among things lying in the doorway whose shapes they could not at first make out. The chamber was lit by a wide shaft high in the further eastern wall. It slanted upward, and far above, a small square patch of blue sky could be seen. The light of the shaft fell directly on a table in the middle of the room, a single oblong box, about 2 feet high, upon which was laid a great slab of white stone. "It looks like a tomb," muttered Frodo, and bent forwards with a curious sense of foreboding, to look more closely at it. Gandalf came quickly to his side. On the slab, runes were deeply graven. "These are Daren's runes, such as were used of old in Moria," said Gandalf. "Here is written in the tongues of men and dwarves, Balin, son of Fundin, Lord of Moria." "He is dead, then," said Frodo. "I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face. And as we find ourselves in this room inside of Lotro, Micah, what do you think of the depiction there?
Oh, I think it's very interesting. They have these very high walls with, I wouldn't say outcroppings, but carvings, little sections carved out, and they have, looks like treasure chests in there.
Yeah,
Probably,
we're going to read about those here in just a few minutes.
Belongings of old dwarven kings or something, and then in the middle of the room they have the higher part of the floor, which leads up to the grave.
The tomb.
Has the exact, I don't know if we mentioned this, but it has the exact writing.
The runes?
You can
exactly
see
as shown, depicted in the book?
It's very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, and as I was reading through this chapter again, I was just very impressed with their depiction in here, especially how we came off of the 21st hall and down, and then to the right.
Yeah, it's very
is
accurate.
this doorway, and then which is on the western wall, and then we're going to read a bit about the eastern side, the eastern wall, and so we'll make sure to point that out when we get to that part. I was going to ask you, Micah, for our listeners that don't play Lotro. And I get plenty of feedback from folks that enjoy the fact that we have the game sounds in the background here. What is the storyline of Lotro? Are we with the Fellowship? Are we before the Fellowship? Are we after the Fellowship? What's going on in the game?
Okay, so obviously it's a developing story, so it changes.
Yes.
But in the beginning... you are following the Fellowship.
Like closely?
Yes. I don't know exactly how closely. I'd say maybe a week or two behind.
Okay.
Maybe. You see the aftermath of the events in the book, but later down the line you join up with them and you fight alongside them.
Can you recall where that takes place? It's not here before.
No, it's not in Moria.
Because I was going to say we are seeing the aftermath of what took place in this chamber.
We'll mention that in a second. But,
yeah.
I can't recall exactly where it is.
But eventually you do catch up with them and fight with them.
I think it's like Rohan.
Okay.
So you help them do. Well, we won't talk about that because spoilers.
Until we get there. Okay.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. So that's where we are in the game. We are at least a week, maybe two, behind the company. And everything that we see is pretty much as they left it, isn't it? All right, let's go ahead and start with Chapter 5, The Bridge of Khazad-dum. The Company of the Ring stood silent beside the tomb of Balin. Frodo thought of Bilbo and his long friendship with the dwarf, and of Balin's visit to the Shire long ago. In that dusty chamber in the mountains, it seemed 1,000 years ago and on the other side of the world. Really shows what's going on inside of Frodo, the emotion that's going on, and he just feels so separate right now.
Yeah,
and it really does follow along with that scape hobbit motif that we have been talking about as Frodo is fulfilling the priestly duty, the priestly office of the Anointed One, of the Messiah, and the loneliness that he's feeling. And this is almost what we've always point out as an elegiac lament. He just continues to have these longings and feelings. However, let's point out that unlike Pippin, Frodo he's not tempted to act on those feelings. He has them, he recognizes them, and then he continues to move forward, right? That's a very special person that will do that. So whereas somebody says, even in passing, what if we have to return back to Rivendell? And Pippin, bing, yes, let's do that. He's longing to go back. We've talked about once you place your hand to the plow, you're not to look back. You're to continue on, and that's what Frodo does. And so these elegiac laments that he has, these are not a character flaw. These are not something that we need to point out and go, well, see what he's doing, that's not right. No, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly acceptable because he continues moving forward. At length, we're going to move forward. At length, they stirred and looked up and began to search for anything that would give them tidings of Balin's fate or show what had become of his folk. There was another smaller door on the other side of the chamber, under the shaft. But both the doors, they could now see that, or by both the doors, they could now see that many bones were lying, and among them were broken swords and axe heads and cloven shields and helms. Some of the swords were crooked, orc scimitars with blackened blades. And in this chamber in Lotro, there's all of these things lying about. There were many recesses cut in the rock of the walls,
There you
and
go.
in them were large iron-bound chests of wood. All had been broken and plundered. But beside the shattered lid of one, there lay the remains of a book. It had been slashed and stabbed and partly burned, and it was so stained with black and other dark marks like old blood that little of it could be read. Gandalf lifted it carefully, but the leaves cracked and broke as he laid it on the slab. He pored over it for some time without speaking. Frodo and Gimli, standing at his side, could see, as he gingerly turned the leaves, that they were written by many different hands in runes, both of Moria and of Dale, and here and there in Elvish script. At last, Gandalf looked up. "It seems to be a record of the fortunes of Balin's folk," he said. "I guess that it began with their coming to Dimril Dale nigh on 30 years ago. The pages seem to have numbers referring to the years after their arrival. The top page is marked 1 to 3, so at least 2 are missing from the beginning." I read that wrong. 1, 3, I guess. "Listen to this. We drove out orcs from the Great Gate and Guard, I think. The next word is blurred or burned, probably room. We slew many in the Bright, I think sun in the Dale. Floy was killed by an arrow. He slew the Great. Then there's a blur followed by Floy under grass near Mirrormere. The next line or two I cannot read. Then comes, we have taken the 21st Hall in North End to dwell in. There is, I cannot read what. A shaft is mentioned. Then Balin has set up his seat in the Chamber of Mazarbul. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
The Chamber of Records, said Gimli. I guess that is where we now stand. Well, I can read no more for a long way, said Gandalf, except for the word gold and Durin's axe and something helm. Stop. Durin's axe. Isn't that one of the quests in Moria?
Oh, is it?
Is it? You have to go and get somebody's, I think it, or is it a sword?
It's not coming to me what you're talking about right now.
Oh, boy.
But
I think it's the axe.
could be likely, yeah.
And that's a great quest. Okay, continuing. Then, Balin is now Lord of Moria. That seems to end a chapter. After some stars, another hand begins, and I can see, we found true silver, and later the word well-forged. And then something, I have it, mithril, in the last 2 lines, oin to seek for the upper armories of the third deep. Something go westwards, a blur, to Hallin's Gate. Gandalf paused and set a few leaves aside. There are several pages of the same sort, rather hastily written and much damaged, he said, but I can make little of them in this light. Now there must be a number of leaves missing, because they begin to be numbered 5, the 5th year of the colony, I suppose. Let me see. No, they are too cut and stained. I cannot read them. We might do better in the sunlight. Wait! Here is something. A large, bold hand using Elvish script. That would be Ori's hand, said Gimli, looking over the wizard's arm. He could write well and speedily, and often used the Elvish characters. I fear he had ill tidings to record in a fair hand, said Gandalf. The first clear word is sorrow, but the rest of the line is lost unless it ends in ester. Yes, it must be yester, followed by day, being the 10th of November. Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimril Dale. He went alone to look in Mirrormere. An orc shot him from behind a stone. We slew the orc, but many more, ... up from the east, up the Silverlode. The remainder of the page is so blurred that I can hardly make anything out, but I think I can read, we have barred the gates, and then, can hold them long if, and then perhaps horrible, and suffer. Poor Balin. He seems to have kept the title that he took for less than 5 years. I wonder what happened afterwards. But there is no time to puzzle out the last few pages. Here is the last page of all. He paused and sighed. Wow. It's weighing heavy on Gandalf to read these things. Mm-hmm. He paused and sighed. It is grim reading, he said. I fear their end was cruel. Listen. We cannot get out. We cannot get out. They have taken the bridge and second hall. Frar and Lonnie and Nali fell there. Then there are 4 lines smeared so that I can only read, went 5 days ago. The last lines run, the pool is up to the wall at Westgate. The watcher in the water took Oin. We cannot get out. The end comes. And then drums. Drums in the deep. I wonder what that means. The last thing written is in a trailing scrawl of elf letters. They are coming. There is nothing more. Gandalf paused and stood in silent thought. A sudden dread and a horror of the chamber fell on the company. We cannot get out, muttered Gimli. It was well for us that the pool had sunk a little and that the watcher was sleeping down at the southern end. A few episodes ago, we were talking about that creature in the water, and you brought up an amazing question. Was he guarding and looking for Frodo because he was on a mission? Or was he wanting the ring for himself itself? Huh?
Yes, I still wonder that.
I wonder it as well. We haven't heard anything from any of our listeners as to their thoughts on that fantastic question. Continuing, Gandalf raised his head and looked round. They seemed to have made a last stand by both doors, he said, but there were not many left by that time. So ended the attempt to retake Moria. It was valiant, but foolish. The time is not come yet. Huh? What? That's a strange statement. The time is not come yet. I would love to just speculate on what that means.
For sure.
But we're going to continue on. Now, I fear, we must say farewell to Balin, son of Fundin. Here he must lie in the halls of his fathers. We will take this book, the Book of Mazarbul, and look at it more closely later. You had better keep it, Gimli, and take it back to Dane if you get a chance. It will interest him, though it will grieve him deeply. Come, let us go. The morning is passing. Which way shall we go? Asked Boromir. Back to the hall, answered Gandalf. But our visit to this room has not been in vain. I now know where we are. This must be, as Gimli says, the Chamber of Mazarbul. And the hall must be the 21st of the north end. Therefore, we should leave by the eastern arch of the hall, and bear right and south, and go downwards. The 21st hall should be on the 7th level. That is 6 above the level of the gates. Come now, back to the hall. Now, getting back to the depiction in The Lord of the Rings Online, we see everything described in here, and even those alcoves or those places, recesses in the wall with those little chests. And because this is or was built and used as the Chamber of Records, I'm going to surmise that all of those chests have records.
Yes, that's what I was thinking as well.
Filled with books, with codices, as they would say back in the olden days. All right, Gandalf had hardly spoken these words. Let me transition back here. When there came a great noise, a rolling boom that seemed to come from the depths far below, and to tremble in the stone at their feet. They sprang towards the door in alarm. Doom, doom, it rolled again, as if huge hands were turning the very caverns of Moria into a vast drum. Then there came an echoing blast. A great horn was blown in the hall, and answering horns and harsh cries were heard further off. There was a hurrying sound of many feet. "They're coming!" cried Legolas. "We cannot get out," said Gimli. "Trapped!" cried Gandalf. "Why did I delay? Here we are, caught just as they were before. But I was not here then. We will see what..." Doom, doom, came the drum beat, and the walls shook. "Slam the doors and wedge them," shouted Aragorn. "And keep your packs on as long as you can. We may get a chance to cut our way out yet." "No," said Gandalf. "We must not get shut in. Keep the east door ajar. We will go that way if we get a chance." Another harsh horn call and shrill cries rang out. Feet were coming down the corridor. There was a ring and clatter as the company drew their swords. Glamdring shone with a pale light, and Sting glinted at the edges. Boromir set his shoulder against the western door. "Wait a moment! Do not close it yet," said Gandalf. He sprang forward to Boromir's side and drew himself up to his full height. When's the last time that we saw him draw himself up to his full height?
I would say Bag End. When is that actually when it was?
No, on our way from the Red Horn Gate to Moria, when they were on that hilltop with the wolves coming.
Of course.
Yes, and it's a scary thing when Gandalf draws himself to his full height. "Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria?" he cried in a loud voice. And I wish I could sound like Sir Ian McKellen.
Yes.
There was a rush of hoarse laughter, like the fall of sliding stones into a pit. Among the clamor, a deep voice was raised in command. Doom, boom, doom, went the drums in the deep.
Nice.
With a quick movement, Gandalf stepped before the narrow opening of the door and thrust forward his staff. There was a dazzling flash that lit the chamber and the passage outside. For an instant, the wizard looked out. Arrows whined and whistled down the corridor as he sprang back. "There are orcs, very many of them," he said, "and some are large and evil, black orcs of Mordor. For the moment, they are hanging back, but there is something else there. A great cave troll, I think, or more than one. There is no hope of escape that way. And no hope at all if they come at the other door as well," said Boromir. "There is no sound outside here yet," said Aragorn, who was standing by the eastern door listening. "The passage on this side plunges straight down a stair. It plainly does not lead back towards the hall, but it is no good flying blindly this way with the pursuit just behind. We cannot block the door. Its key is gone and the lock is broken, and it opens inward. We must do something to delay the enemy first. We will make them fear the Chamber of Mazarbul," he said grimly, feeling the edge of his sword Anduril. So epic!
It is.
I think this is the most epic portion of the book that we've gotten to yet.
Yeah, I agree.
mean, this is high drama, as Brendan would talk about if he were here with us. I mean, the stakes just keep raising higher and higher. That's drama. Continuing. Heavy feet were heard in the corridor. Boromir flung himself against the door and heaved it to. Then he wedged it with broken sword blades and splinters of wood. The company retreated to the other side of the chamber, but they had no chance to fly yet. There was a blow on the door that made it quiver, and then it began to grind slowly open, driving back the wedges. A huge arm and shoulder with dark skin of greenish scales was thrust through the widening gap. Then a great, flat, toeless foot was forced through below. There was a dead silence outside.
Real quick, have you noticed that everything Tolkien described as being very dark and, black colored, Peter Jackson then made very pale?
And I'm sure that's because of the lighting.
Yeah.
When they're... No, I know what you're saying. But I would hope, I'm pretty sure with all that CGI and the dark filters that they were having to use and all of that stuff. So we'll cut him a little bit of slack there. We love Sir Peter Jackson.
Sure do.
Okay, we do. Not so much on The Hobbit, but that wasn't his fault. That was not his fault at all. You chalk that up to the movie company. Continuing. Boromir leaped forward and hewed at the arm with all his might, but his sword rang, glanced aside, and fell from his shaken hand. The blade was notched. I don't know if you have ever experienced this, Micah, but perhaps some of the listeners out there, if you have a metal bar or a pole or something, and you take that thing and you holding it with your bare hands and you hit it against a rock or a light pole. Have you ever felt that feeling?
It hurts.
That's what he just felt, and that's a terrible feeling. Suddenly, and to his own surprise, Frodo felt a hot wrath blaze up in his heart. "The Shire!" he cried, and springing beside Boromir, he stooped and stabbed with sting at the hideous foot. There was a bellow, and the foot jerked back, nearly wrenching sting from Frodo's arm. Black drops dripped from the blade and smoked on the floor.
Now that's a cool description. It's like his blood is acid or something.
Yes. Boromir hurled himself against the door and slammed it again. "One for the Shire!" cried Aragorn. "The Hobbit's bite is deep. You have a good blade, Frodo, son of Drogo." There was a crash on the door, followed by crash after crash. Rams and hammers were being against it. It cracked and staggered back, and the opening grew suddenly wide. Arrows came whistling in, but struck the northern wall and fell harmlessly to the floor. There was a horn blast and a rush of feet, and orcs, one after another, leaped into the chamber. How many there were, the company could not count. Remember that. So many orcs are coming in here that they have no idea what the number is. Mm-hmm. The affray was sharp, but the orcs were dismayed by the fierceness of the defense. Legolas shot two through the throat. Gimli hewed the legs from under another that had sprung up on Balin's tomb. Boromir and Aragorn slew many. When 13 had fallen, the rest fled shrieking, leaving the defenders unharmed except for Sam, who had a scratch along the scalp. A quick duck had saved him, and he had failed his orc. A sturdy thrust with his barrow blade. A fire was smoldering in his brown eyes that would have made Ted Sandyman step back if he had seen it. Wow, Micah, what is this communicating to us?
Sam's a warrior.
You know, it reminds me of back in Bag End, about 60 years prior, an instance describing Bilbo. Bullroarer's gentler descendant was reviving in the drawing room, right? Because he passed out. After a while and a drink, he crept nervously to the door of the parlor. This was what he heard. Gloin speaking, huff, or some snort more or less like that. "What will he do you think? It is all very well for Gandalf to talk about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in a moment of excitement would..." Where's my... Hold on a second. Why is this doing this? I can't scroll over. would I guess be enough to wake the dragon and all his relatives and kill the lot of us. I think it sounded more like fright than excitement. In fact, if it had not been for the sign on the door, I should have been sure we had come to the wrong house. As soon as I clapped eyes on the little fellow bobbing and puffing on the mat, I had my doubts. He looks more like a grocer than a burglar. Then Mr. Baggins turned the handle and went in. The Took side had won. He suddenly felt he would go without bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. As for little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what he did now, and he said to himself, Bilbo, you were a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it. It's that Tookish part. Now, I know years ago when we began this podcast, there at the very beginning, and we were talking about, concerning hobbits, right? The introduction and whatnot. And a lot of these hobbits have Took in them. Okay, and when it comes down to it, Frodo is going to be fierce, and Sam is going to be fierce, and later on we'll see if the other two will be fierce. We already know the answer. Now is the time, cried Gandalf. Let us go before the troll returns. But even as they retreated and before Pippin and Merry had reached the stair outside, a huge orc chieftain, almost man-high, clad in black mail from head to foot, leaped into the chamber. Behind him, his followers clustered in the doorway. His broad, flat face was swart. His eyes were like coals, and his tongue was red. He wielded a great spear. With a thrust of his huge hide shield, he turned Boromir's sword and bore him backwards, throwing him to the ground. This is a mean orc.
Sure is.
To be able to monkey toss Boromir? Diving under Aragorn's blow with the speed of a striking snake, he charged into the company and thrust with his spear straight at Frodo. This orc chieftain, who's almost man-high, is not a cave troll like in the films, is so skilled that he knocks Boromir down and dodges a strike from Aragorn. Wow!
I love the descriptions of orcs.
Yeah.
They're just very fascinating.
Well, that's thanks to the genius of the professor. I mean, this is descriptive writing at its best. I mean, what can be said? The blow caught Frodo, on the right side, and Frodo was hurled against the wall and pinned. Sam, with a cry, hacked at the spear shaft and it broke. Sam! This orc knocks down Boromir, dodges Aragorn, strikes Frodo, and Sam stops him. Well, breaks the shaft that took out his master. But even as the orc flung down the truncheon and swept out his scimitar, Anduril came down upon his head. You only dodge Aragorn once.
Oh, yes.
There was a flash like flame, and the helm burst asunder. The orc fell with cloven head. Wow.
Now, if you think about a helmet, those things are designed to stop a sword blow, specifically.
Yeah, whether it's either by blunt or to deflect it, right? They're shaped in such a way that hopefully...
A blunt would most likely cause you some head trauma, but it's designed to make the blade...
Yeah, glance off.
What kind of blade does Aragorn have that cuts straight through a
He has the
helm?
one that cut the ring off of Sauron's hand.
That's so cool.
Man, epic! Well, what happened? The orc fell with cloven head. His followers fled howling as Boromir and Aragorn sprang at them. Doom! Doom! went the drums in the deep. The great voice rolled out again. "Now!" shouted Gandalf. "Now is the last chance! Run for it!" Aragorn picked up Frodo where he lay by the wall and made for the stair, pushing Merry and Pippin in front of him. The others followed, but Gimli had to be dragged away by Legolas. In spite of the peril, he lingered by Balin's tomb with his head bowed.
I love that.
Oh,
And the whole battle, he was defending the tomb.
Yes. Isn't that's very emotional? When I read that, I get the that feeling that those the goosebumps and the chills and the shiver down my spine.
All the races of Middle Earth are very they have a camaraderie. I mean, with the Fellowship, you see all the races having a camaraderie for each other, but specifically with the specific races, they always have such honor and respect for.
And you know what? Going back to our previous episode when we were talking about the creation of the dwarves by Aule, they are separate from the other races. Mm-hmm. They have a different origin, and they have a different mission. They have a different end. They're what will take place in the last days. They will be, remember, because Aule is the forger. He's the smith, and he, along with the dwarves, will rebuild a perfect Ea, or Arda, I should say, more specifically. Rebuild the world. Yeah, that's... Okay, that's heavy duty. Let me read that again. The others followed, but Gimli had to be dragged away by Legolas. In spite of the peril, he lingered by Balin's tomb with his head bowed. In honor, in respect, and in mourning. Boromir hauled the eastern door to, grinding upon its hinges. It had great iron rings on either side, but could not be fastened. "I'm all right," gasped Frodo. "I can walk. Put me down." Aragorn nearly dropped him in his amazement. "I thought you were dead!" he cried. "No, not yet," said Gandalf. "But there is no time for wonder. Off you go, all of you, down the stairs. Wait a few minutes for me at the bottom. But if I do not come soon, go on. Go quickly and choose paths leading right and downwards. We cannot leave you to hold the door alone," said Aragorn. "Do as I say," said Gandalf fiercely. "Swords are no more use here. Go!" The passage was lit by no shaft and was utterly dark. They groped their way down a long flight of steps and then looked back. But they could see nothing except high above them the faint glimmer of the wizard's staff. He seemed to be still, standing on guard by the closed door. Frodo breathed heavily and leaned against Sam, who put his arms about him. There, that love that Sam has for Frodo it gets me every time. That gets me right in the feels, man. That's so tender,
Yeah.
And makes me want to go back and let's just start reading the story of David, and Saul's son, Nathan. Okay, gathering myself. Where was I? There we go. They stood peering up the stairs into the darkness. Frodo thought he could hear the voice of Gandalf above, muttering words that ran down the sloping roof with a sighing echo. He could not catch what was said. The walls seemed to be trembling. Every now and again, the drum beats throbbed and rolled. Doom, 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 doom. Suddenly, at the top of the stair, there was a stab of white light, and there was a dull rumble and a heavy thud. The drum beats broke out wildly. Doom, boom, doom, boom, and then stopped. Gandalf came flying down the steps and fell to the ground in the midst of the company. Well, that's over," said the wizard, struggling to his feet. "I've done all that I could, but I've met my match and have nearly been destroyed. But don't stand here. Go on. You will have to do without light for a while. I'm rather shaken. Go on. Go on. Where are you, Gimli? Come ahead with me. Keep close behind, all of you. They stumbled after him, wondering what had happened. Doom, doom, went the drum beats again. They now sounded muffled and far away, but they were following. There was no other sound of pursuit, neither tramp of feet nor any voice. Gandalf took no turns, right or left, for the passage seemed to be going in the direction that he desired. Every now and again it descended a flight of steps, 50 or more, to a lower level. At the moment, that was their chief danger, for in the dark they could not see a descent until they came on it and put their feet out into emptiness. Gandalf felt the ground with his staff like a blind man. At the end of an hour, they had gone a mile, or maybe a little more, and had descended many flights of stairs. There was still no sound of pursuit. Almost they began to hope that they would escape. At the bottom of the 7th flight, Gandalf halted. "It's getting hot," he gasped. "We ought to be down at least to the level of the gates now. Soon, I think we should look for a left-hand turn to take us east. I hope it is not far. I'm very weary. I must rest here a moment, even if all the orcs ever spawned are after us." Gimli took his arm and helped him down to a seat on the step. "What happened away up there?" "At the door," he asked. "Did you meet the beater of the drums?" "I do not know," answered Gandalf. "But I found myself suddenly faced by something that I have not met before. I could think of nothing to do but to try and put a shutting spell on the door. I know many, but to do things of that kind rightly requires time, and even then the door can be broken by strength. As I stood there, I could hear orc voices on the other side. At any moment I thought they would burst it open. I could not hear what was said. They seemed to be talking in their own hideous language. All I caught was gash, that is, fire. Then something came into the chamber. I felt it through the door, and the orcs themselves were afraid and fell silent. It laid hold on the iron ring, and then it perceived me and my spell. Sorry for that plosive. What it was, I cannot guess, but I have never felt such a challenge. The counterspell was terrible. It nearly broke me. For an instant, the door left my control and began to open. I had to speak a word of command. That proved too great a strain. The door burst into pieces. Something dark as a cloud was blocking out all light inside, and I was thrown backwards down the stair. All the wall gave way, and the roof of the chamber as well, I think. Micah, what's he describing there? Can you see anything?
Yes, exactly what happened. The roof and the wall have collapsed, and that way is no longer accessible. So if you want to explore the section that they run down, you have to actually go all the way around a different route and then go back up.
And you can see it?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. But now he had already talked about leaving this chamber and he was wanting to go back to the 21st Hall and then off there anyway, which in game you have to do that.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
But the orcs were coming from that way, so.
So they did a great job on that.
They sure did, yes.
On the Chamber of Mazarbul. Is that how you say it?
Mazarbul is how I
Mazarbul.
say it, but I don't know if that's right.
Well, I like it. Better than how I say it.
Mazarbul.
Yeah, Mazarbul. I'm afraid Balin is buried deep, and maybe something else is buried there too. I cannot say. But at least the passage behind us was completely blocked. I have never felt so spent, but it is passing. And now what about you, Frodo? There was not time to say so, but I have never been more delighted in my life than when you spoke. I feared that it was a brave but dead hobbit that Aragorn was carrying. What about me? said Frodo. I'm alive and whole, I think. I'm bruised and in pain, but it is not too bad. Well, said Aragorn, I can only say that hobbits are made of a stuff so tough that I have never met the like of it. Had I known, I would have spoken softer in the inn at Bree. And I think that's Aragorn's sense of humor shining through there. Yep. He's a great man.
He sure is.
Great man, Aragorn.
Great man, Dumbledore.
That's what Hagrid would say of Aragorn.
Mm-hmm.
Great man, Aragorn. Okay, that spear thrust would have skewered a wild boar. Well, it did not skewer me, I'm glad to say, said Frodo, though I feel as I had been caught between a hammer and an anvil. He said no more. He found breathing painful. You take after Bilbo, said Gandalf. There is more about you than meets the eye, as I said of him long ago. Remember, and I think that he's referring to out of the frying pan into the fire. After they all get out, and Bilbo escapes Gollum, and then he makes his way out there and then appears, right? And they all thought he was dead. The dwarves looked at him with quite a new respect when he talked about dodging guards, jumping over Gollum, and squeezing through as if it was not very difficult or alarming. What did I tell you? Said Gandalf, laughing. Mr. Baggins has more about him than you guess. He gave Bilbo a queer look from under his bushy eyebrows as he said this, and the hobbit wondered if he guessed at the part of his tale that he had left out. So again, you take after Bilbo, said Gandalf. There's more about you than meets the eye, as I said of him long ago. Frodo wondered if the remark meant more than it said.
It's almost exactly the same thing.
Yes. It would be fun to compare the journeys. Maybe we'll do that when we... I kind of decided unilaterally. I mean, now if I'm outvoted, then I'll be outvoted. But I think that we should do The Hobbit after we finish The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, that gives me a chance to say last week, during Amazon Prime Day, I was able to get a copy of Dr. Corey Olsen's book exploring J.r.r. Tolkien's The Hobbit for $6.
Nice.
And I am excited. Anyway, that was a little sidebar there. Okay, just a little bit longer, Micah. Actually, I think, how much further did I want to go?
There's not too much left.
No, there is. There's a lot left. I think, Micah, that,
Oh, no.
You need say no more. We'd best get a move on. There are still goblins about.
Oh, bother. More mountains?
No, don't you see? The sun is setting in the west, behind the mountains. We're on the other side, to the edge of the land beyond.
the rest of the chapter is equally as epic as this first half, and I wanted to save it for, hopefully Brendan will be back with us the next time, especially when we get to the Bridge of Khazad-dum, and we're going to want to talk about Balrogs, and we're going to want to talk about Gandalf as the servant of the secret fire, and we're going to want to treat the remainder of this chapter with respect. I hope that we did justice to the first half. This is,
I think we did.
Again, high drama. And such, we're really now in this, I don't want to use the word again, but in this dramatic scene, we're really seeing all of these characters come out even more. We're learning much more about each of them. Even the little snippet of Legolas and his fear. Oh, no, we haven't got to that
Yeah, we
yet.
haven't seen that yet.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
but I know what you
next
mean.
week.
Yeah,
yes. But the fierceness of hobbits. What they can do when pushed, right? Aragorn and Boromir were momentarily duped by this orc chieftain, but almost instantly they're back. You know,
Sam gave them the chance to
Yes.
recover themselves.
yes. Oh, wow. Such fantastic stuff. I just love reading this, and now I'm just going to throw out all kinds of adjectives and a lot of drama. And a lot of good stuff in the game that we were able to correlate and learn about. So you folks that play Lotro, you know, when you're going through and you're following the storyline, you know, starting from the beginning, and you know that you're just days or weeks behind the company, you know, starting out first of just the hobbits and then meeting up in Bree, you know, pay attention to the things that they have left behind. Like when you get to Crick Hollow and you see the cloak that's on the floor, you'll know about that. We talked about that in that episode so long ago. So anyway, what stood out to you, listeners, in this part of the Bridge of Khazad-dum, this first half? We threw some questions out there for you to consider and to get back to us. But we don't have nobody, the party invitations were ignored.
Oh, no.
Last time. Oh, well. So let's talk about a little bit more of our own party tree things. Micah, what'd you do in California? Anything fun?
No. Not really.
Yes, you did. You were there for 12 days. You went with your special friend and for your high school graduation, and you ate In-N-Out and sent me pictures, of course.
Yep, of course.
But you didn't bring me back a double-double with grilled onions?
Well, I don't think it would have survived the trip.
It would have been just fine. It only takes 4 hours to fly this way.
Yeah, we ate at all the staple California places and we did some cool museums and all kinds of stuff.
The beach, whale watching.
Yep.
What was your favorite part?
The whale watching, I would say.
Yeah.
And the beach. That's the only beautiful part of California.
Well, Southern California.
I won't bad talk any states but
says the guy who is a native Californian. However, you've lived the vast majority of your life.
Yeah, I'm native, so I can trash it.
Yes, and that's how I look at it as well. Hey, in the video update that I made, I mentioned a new video series that I want to start doing that is related to Middle-earth and high fantasy altogether. So if you have not watched that video, again, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/secretfirepodcast and you'll see the video update. Or if you subscribe to our YouTube channel for the Secret Fire Podcast, it'll be right on there. But I am thinking in the meantime, while I get that straightened out, I'm thinking of doing a simple video series. And I'm wanting to... It's Tolkien related. We'll put it on our Secret Fire Podcast YouTube channel, and we're going to take a closer look at the life of j.r.r. Tolkien, and especially through his own words. Just do some short, hopefully 2, 3, 5 minute long videos, because I know I'm sure a lot of people are like me. I go on YouTube all the time, and if videos are longer than 10 or 15 minutes, I'm probably not going to watch it.
Oh no, I'm all for the half-hour ones, honestly.
Are you?
Yeah.
I do watch at least one half-hour one. There's another YouTube channel that I'm really stuck on, and I have been for the last few months. It's called Townsend, and it's this. He's a living history guy, a reenactor, and he does a lot of cooking, 18th century cooking. And, American, it's just absolutely fascinating. Oh, that's another thing. I want to ask listeners out there, and I think I put this question out on our Twitter account, but I didn't receive any feedback, so I'll do it here on the podcast, and hopefully somebody will know. Are you aware of any writings that would compare the Shire folk, the hobbits, to pre-industrial age Europe? They say the industrial age officially started in about 1760, and especially in the early 1800s, was really, going gangbusters. But my contention, or my affirmative here, what I'm going to propose, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is that I believe that Tolkien had in mind the Shire folk as being akin to 16th century, 15th century England. He describes them as country folk, just English country folk.
I've heard like comparisons to even like Kentucky.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, if you're
talking,
if you're talking, especially early 1700s, like when when did the Pilgrims come over? 16 whatever. And then but before the industrial age, and we know when we get to the end of this book, spoiler alert, Tolkien wasn't too keen on machinery and mechanizations and such, and especially when we get to the scouring of the Shire, right? And so that's my belief, is that he would say that, and I thought that I read it somewhere, but I just can't find it, that he would describe, I know he describes the hobbits as simple English country folk, but what time period would they be analogous to? And I would say, the early 16th century, 15th century and early 16th century.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, so, but I want that corroborated because that's going to help me out with this other project that I'm working on. So, listeners, let us know. Next week, we will do part 2, or next time, I should say. Hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll be back in the studio, and Brendan will be back with us. We'll finish the Bridge of Khazad-dum, part 2. But before we leave, we have other party invitations to send out. The Secret Fire podcast is live in the GCT Network studio whenever we are actually live in the studio. We'll send out notifications when we're broadcasting on our Twitch page at twitch.tv/Secret Fire Podcast.
I actually forgot to pull up my thing.
All right.
Twitter, the best way to contact us is Twitter at Secret Fire Cast.
Yes!
And you can join us on the Arkenstone server in Lord of the Rings Online at lotro.com.
You did that well without a script.
Got him.
You can send us email to secretfire@gctnetwork.com or call the Hobbit hotline and leave a voicemail at 507-407-GCTN, or our backup Hobbit hotline right there in Crick Hollow. Fatty Bulger is standing by.
Hello?
Hi, Fatty. And that would be 507-407-4286. You can subscribe to the Secret Fire podcast in all of your podcast apps out there. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, or your favorite podcatcher. Just search them all for the Secret Fire podcast. Our theme song, Hobbit's Dance, is from the album Memories of Middle-earth by Brobdingnagian Bards. You can find out more about them and buy all the music on their website at thebards.net. To find out more about the Secret Fire podcast, as well as our other shows, including Finding Christ in Cinema and the Theonauts, visit our main website at gctnetwork.com. If you like the Secret Fire podcast, please share it with your friends and review the show in iTunes. But if you love the Secret Fire podcast, please become a patron and sustaining member of the fellowship on our Patreon page at patreon.com/GCTN. And until next time, we regret to tell you...
This is the end. I'm going away. I'm leaving. Now, goodbye.
Goodbye!
Bye!
It was tied to a
Orc Chieftain.
helm,
Yeah.
cloven in two.
By Anduril.
Boom, 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 boom. Alrighty. And that is that. So anybody that has watched the video, whether it's on Twitch or on YouTube, thank you for sticking with us. And again, just subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcatcher and never miss an episode. And we will see you next time here on the Secret Fire Podcast.